And action.
Episode 10.
All right, episode 10. From high atop the Meadowlark Manor
Basement.
Right on. So last
tower.
week, that in the tower. So last week we talked a lot about absolute truth, and that kind of leads us to what I call release the message, and that is about finding what is the truth of the situation, or not just the truth, but what is most important about what we're talking about.
Is it like, because that's I talk about this a lot, like making sure during it's in the context of a conversation, right? Like, do you hear me? Do I hear you? Or we? Is that, or?
Well, I think that would be like one aspect of it, too.
But not necessarily.
Not
necessarily.
Not
case of releasing.
Right. Well, I think there's a lot of aspects to this, and I think the most important thing about release the message. So I'm using release the message as a broad term for several different things.
Yeah. Okay.
And so the most important thing is that the truth, learning the truth, that's the solution to any illusion. Right? And so if we're living, the illusion of separation, which I'm saying is our biggest problem, right? We have the illusion of separation. So truth is the solution to that.
But because the truth is we're not separated.
Right.
And so if you're looking at things as being separated, then you're false or whatever.
Well,
and so we got to get back to this point before we can do anything else.
Right, yeah. So we have to do that. So if we're trying to step out of the illusion, we want to be into truth. And of course, we talked a lot about absolute truth last week, and that's complicated. But also that, like, one of the things I think that's worth repeating is that we talked about maybe instead of absolute truth, and it's just semantics, but use the term reality.
No,
So that way, reality is one thing, and then, yes, there are truths or things that are true on Earth, and that occurs within the reality. Mm-hmm. And then, I think it's also important to say, that we talked about in the one big whole, the idea of the one big whole that we're all part of. If you call that God, if you call that the universe, if you call that the Tao, I don't think we even said that term last week, right? That's the Tao. Like, all things are in the Tao. So if you've read the Tao Te Ching, that's what it goes. So all of those things are the one big whole, and that is part of the reality. Reality is the whole. And then life.
And
all of life is the whole.
Yeah, and in that case, you wouldn't have to necessarily release the message if you know that all that stuff is the same thing. You can use whatever semantic term you want.
Right.
Because, so the message is the same in that case.
Right.
So there is
always the one big whole. You're always part of that.
Right.
And so, so living in the truth is just necessary to step out of that illusion of separateness. And one of the best questions I think I've ever seen, and that is just simply, would you want to know the truth even if it means that you are wrong? And so, right?
Right.
I mean,
because I can see where some people would be so terrified of being wrong,
right?
But they'd rather be wrong. Whereas I'm like, well, yeah, just tell me what it is and beat me up for the being wrong later.
Right. So that's a great place to me to just start. Is that okay? Mm-hmm. What's most important? Yes, I would want to know the truth. Yeah,
that's fascinating because one thing I thought of while you were talking was to take two people that have some identity politics. I don't want to use any specific terms, but two people that have two flat earthers. Okay, two people who meet each other and they both agree that there's a flat Earth. That they think the Earth is flat. There's not going to be an incentive to release the message because instead they found someone who agrees with their non-truth interpretation of reality, and so they're going to hide in that protective cocoon of ignorance, not in a bad way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So instead of, it's safer to find somebody that disagrees with your wrongness,
right?
Than it is to actually be wrong, admit you're wrong, and then have to go out and search for this. And so maybe that's that fear of being unsafe is what drives people not to do what we're talking about.
Right.
That just made me think of that when you were talking about it. I can sort of sympathize, I guess, with people who choose to ignore the truth or whatever just because it is being wrong is hard, and this is a scary thing.
Right, and I think, dude, you've talked about it for so long in your series, all your podcasts, episodes 50 to 100 about the shoulds, the R's versus the shoulds, and we are so ingrained in the should that society, the cultural influences, right, would be another way to say that. The cultural influences that we, and I'm not a big fan of the word indoctrination, but like that's what we're indoctrinated into.
Yeah, it sounds nefarious or like evil or something.
Yeah, that we believe these things to be true, you know, and it can be as simple as that. Like, okay, so what a pattern of it would be like, well, you graduate high school and you go to college, and if you don't go to college, you need to go to the service or something, you know.
You only have like 3 choices.
And you should then, you know, after college, if you're not going on to school, you better be getting married. And if you're getting married, you better be having a kid. And if you're having a kid, they should be baptized into the church or whatever. And so it's all those things that it should happen. And, you know, so Shelley and I kind of dealt with that, where Shelley's brother and our sister-in-law, you know, they had a child, and then they wanted to have the child baptized in the church. And I don't have a problem with that. Like, I'm not on the base, but they're not active in the church, and it was simply that it was like that is what had happened to him growing up. So that's what he thought he had to do. And I mean that's a whole other story. But anyway, so the shoulds. The shoulds are so influential in us that we believe them to be true.
Well, yeah, and I would argue, I mean, I don't want to take too big of a tangent, but I mean, all of the issues that I sort of am still trying to work through to be a better human being are related to those shoulds. And so I don't want to like underemphasize the strength of that. What did you call it before indoctrination? The softer version of that. Well, what Don Miguel Ruiz calls domestication.
Yeah, domestication.
The cultural influences.
Yeah, cultural influences
are so strong and so subtle and so under the scenes and so like off the radar that we don't even know what's happening. Right. And so until you even can open up to the possibility that perhaps you have been taught some things and you are kind of running on automatic pilot about, then there's where do you start? I mean, it's funny because when people say we're in the Matrix, I think, well, in a way, the way I see that to be true is that we do have this programming, right? We've been programmed to think we have to get our kids baptized or buy the house or go to college. And so we're kind of implementing those programs. And so in that case, that's how I see we are living in the Matrix. If somebody says that, I don't actually think we're computer memory bits, you know, but I do think we're running on an automatic pilot in a lot of ways.
Yeah, well, okay, so and that idea then is kind of what Release the Message is even about, is that we're not literally, that would be an example of Release the Message. Right. Is you're seeing the underlying message in the Matrix, right? So it doesn't have to be literally. So one of my favorite, it's a metaphor, and so, or like there would be idioms, or parables or whatever that tell the story. And so one of my favorite just simple quotes is like a lot of storytellers would start something with, I don't know if this really happened, but I know that it is true. Right? So the underlying message is what's important.
It's almost like you're saying, don't pay specific attention to the words, but get the vibe of what I'm trying. Which is like the Bible. That's the biggest thing.
Sure.
Because I didn't grow up religious. One of the first things I noticed was when people would be like, you know, the tablet that Moses wrote the 10 Commandments on was found in Israel. And I'd be like, what? That was a story, right? You're not even supposed to do that. You're not supposed to take that literally, are you? Did I miss something?
Right.
Like, it was just so obvious that there was a message in there that's important, but all the details were really just...
Right, and so that's a super important point. So that goes two ways, right? So there is the literal interpretation of it that misses the true meaning, the important piece of information, the
you
lesson
lose it
learned.
Because you're paying attention to the wrong thing.
You lose it. But then what can happen on the other perspective, so to speak, right, is that because we believe it's a myth and that it's not true, right? And then a lot of myths, of course, have something like a supernatural being in it, right? So because that supernatural being is in the story, then it's just like, well, that's false.
Yeah,
and
so
blah, blah, blah.
it diminishes the value of the message or something.
Well,
right?
they let it diminish
Okay,
it.
yeah,
It
yeah. It
doesn't
can. It
diminish,
has the
right? Yeah,
capacity
it can,
to.
right? And
Oh,
I mean,
I see. So you're saying the opposition can come in and be like,
right.
Moses wasn't even real. Show me his grave or something. So
Right,
that
yeah.
whole thing's BS.
So they miss it. So
Yeah,
the one
yeah.
side misses the message by taking it literally, and another perspective can miss the message by just insisting that the whole thing is fake.
Right.
And again, it's still taking it literally, and it's missing the message within. And so, I mean, this is a gigantic problem in all our.
Oh yeah.
I mean, the Bible is the inerrant word of God, and so okay. So one of the things we've talked about on. So this is a great one, and you're going to combine two of the things that I suggest: reverse the roles to release the message.
Oh,
Right.
sweet. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Right.
So-
to get to this.
Right. So okay. So the ultimate thing is we need to find out what's the truth of the story. What's the most
Yeah.
important piece of information or whatever. Okay. Well, how am I going to do that? Well, if I'm just saying the Bible is an inerrant word of God, and I was born in the United States, which is stereotypically, tends to be more of a Christian country, obviously, than a Muslim country. Okay. And so if I say that, and a person that was raised as a Muslim, and they wouldn't use these exact terms, but
Yeah, yeah.
the meaning, same to release the message here, the meaning,
I'm trying to get to a point.
they would say, well, no, the Quran is the inerrant
Right,
word of
right.
Allah.
Right.
Okay. It's the same thing. Okay. So now you have two perspectives. And what just happened? This person was raised over here. This person was raised over here. This person was told Bible's the inerrant word. This person is told the Quran is the inerrant word. We use the word God and Allah,
Totally.
meaning the same things, actually, when you would get down to it. And so then what do? We fight over
Yeah, right.
this.
We let those
Right.
differences become the focal. Well, it makes me think of an example, a metaphor or an analogy would be if you have Eastern European sort of heritage, you grew up on a diet that was primarily grain based. If you are of Eastern Asian heritage, you probably grew up with a diet that was rice based. So you're going to have preferences for
Okay.
different types of foods in your diet, the purpose of which is to keep you alive. So you get together and you eat and you have this like, no, I don't like wheat. No, I don't like rice. Well, we're both going to die if we don't eat.
Right.
So it's kind of the same thing, right? I mean, it's like the goal and the truth, because the first thing you said was sort of like to know the truth. It's like, well, why do you want to know the truth? What is the goal here? And the goal is, to find some wisdom, to learn something, to know things. And in the case of religion, it's to do the things that religion is supposed to do for you.
Yeah. Well, and that is to connect. So
Which is the
religion
opposite of fighting about it.
Right. Yeah. So okay, that's a really good point. So religion is to reconnect, right? Religio. I think it would be
cool.
relarge or something.
Nice.
Something. Look it up, whatever.
Yeah.
But I mean, religio
Etymology.
is to reconnect with the whole, the one big whole, with God, the universe, Allah, whatever you want to say, the one big whole. Okay, that which there is none opposite then.
This should be
Okay.
the way you open every class meeting, every work. Every time people get together, they should remind themselves that our purpose is to connect. Let's not let
Yeah.
this disconnect us.
Right.
Sorry.
Right. Yeah. And so the illusion of separation causes this disconnection. And so for me, and I maybe said this in one of the episodes, one of the things that specifically set me on this path, and I was on the path, moving around.
Yeah. Circuitously.
But I knew I was kind of going a direction, but this focused it. So I was sitting at I'm sure I've told this story.
Yeah.
I'm sitting with my aunt's. At my aunt's funeral, I was sitting with my cousin's husband, who's very kind of spiritually oriented and has some unique stories himself. And I said, and I don't remember exactly what was going on in my life at the time, but said something like, I don't know, I just feel so disconnected. And he just looked at me, right through me, right? And said, disconnected from what?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm the one that said it, So what was I disconnected from? Well, I'm disconnected, again, from the one big whole, from God, from the universe, whatever you want to say, from the unity that we experience within. And that's relationships. That's why we share this experience to engage in that unity and experience it. And of course, I mean, when you think about like the problems we have of loneliness that leads to loneliness and other problems, but I mean, just leading to things like, well, suicide, which is exponential.
And mass shootings.
Yeah.
I mean, or I mean, any of it. That's pretty ginormous. And part of that is it's difficult to I mean, how do you find people who are open to connection? I mean, so there's, in trying to connect, if you run up against someone who's so disconnected that they've forgotten, then you're never gonna, it takes two to tango.
Yeah.
Right? So it's a problem that perpetuates it or
Well,
exaggerates itself exponentially through time.
Sure, but so I think the key to that is that the opposite true. So it's what the fractals. How would that be? The fractals create the broader, grow to the bigger portion, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so yes, the fractals broken up.
Yeah.
Or go more towards it broken up, but as you live your life in what I would call integrity, right? Wholeness.
Right. See,
integrity and wholeness are the same things.
Right.
Connectedness, integrity, connectedness, wholeness are really all the same. I might be nuanced, but it's all going the same way. And you're going then towards what I call, so like in my book I talked about it as the truth. I'm orienting myself towards the truth, meaning reality, the one big whole God.
Yeah.
I'm orienting myself towards that. I'm a human. I can't know exactly what that is.
Or exactly what to do to...
Right, but I can do the best I can. And then, I mean, this is something to get into down the road, but... And okay, so I just literally felt a chill when I said that, because this is true. I can use my feelings of how I feel to orient myself.
Yeah,
when I feel connected, I'm connected.
You do more of that.
Yeah, and if you're feeling things like anger and sadness and being scared, all things that are lacking connectedness, you don't feel connected clearly because you feel those other things. And it's not to say that those feelings can't be useful, right? Okay, I don't want to like dismiss those.
Yeah, right. They're wrong or bad or something.
Right. They're not necessarily wrong or bad, because you could have, I would argue that you could have sadness and feel connected to something, but you got to distinguish what's going on.
That's something I struggle with a lot, because I get into this, and maybe this is too literal, is that how do I know that this feeling of connection is real, or if it's based on some element of my life that isn't really related to, like somebody who's a chronic gambler, they might really like the feeling of winning. And so when they're winning and they're chasing that win, they think, oh, this makes me feel good. I feel connected. I'm happy. Therefore, I must be doing something right. When in reality, I mean, that may not be the best example, because most people would argue that a gambling addiction is a bad thing. But the point, I think the point is there. It's like sometimes it's hard to tell,
right?
Because there's no authority to say, yes, you're living in integrity because this is the right thing to do. But what you said about your feelings, if you are connected emotionally to yourself and you have like a high emotional intelligence and capacity to sort of understand your somatic body, you're more likely to be right and not misinterpret a positive feeling as being connected to the one big whole.
Right. And then, so I mean,
or integrity.
I think that's something that maybe we can get into down the road, but I mean, that's all like super important.
Well,
I guess maybe the simplest thing though is, okay, so if you feel that this is right, so now you can go into your feelings and what happens as you interact with other people then. And how is this affecting them? And then, so like on something, okay, like somebody that's gambling, like, well, has that affected their personal life?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, like, I'm sure there's tons of people that have been divorced over gambling, right?
Yeah, I don't think anybody will argue that.
Yeah. So, okay, how is this affecting? So it's like, something can, how would that be? Like something can work. Okay, this is happening, like this is working for me.
Yeah.
But then you have to, after it's working for you in whatever way, then you take kind of the go,
Oh, it's a cost
Well,
benefit analysis.
is it good or bad?
Yeah, it's a
is
cost
it
benefit analysis.
right?
It's
Is it
like,
affecting somebody else
are
negatively?
are the gains, are the overall holistic community and individual gains higher than
Right.
the pain that it causes?
The suffering. Is it causing
It's simple
another
math.
suffering? Right. Yeah. So you have to
Economics.
do that. So I think just to try to stay on release the
Yeah.
message, I thought of 4 specific ways to from a base way to a little more complex, and there could be 10 specific ways, but here's just 4. And so the first one is just simply with release the message is just different words in different languages sometimes have the same meaning, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And
That's pretty understandable.
I mean, and that's so base, but that's where, so we see that super easy in something like beer versus cerveza. Well, it's the same thing.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, right. I ordered beer in a Spanish-speaking
Yeah.
country. I order a cerveza. I mean, a Corona says cerveza on it, right? You know, that's what, so you see that. Well, okay, well, a foreign country that doesn't use the English language from, so a foreign country from the United States doesn't use the English language and uses a different word for God.
Right.
It's the
What's
same
the
thing.
difference? Yeah.
So it's easy for us to see.
cool.
On
Yeah, no,
some
but
levels.
that really makes the point, because saying Allah and God in their story before is kind of like, yeah, but they're different. But now when you say it
Right.
like that, it really literally is the same thing.
Well, and then of course there can be like the term too, and so this is not kind of on the cerveza beer God Allah level, but like a word like toboggan. Depending on where you live in this country, can be a hat. Like that was never a stock and knit hat in my like where I grew up, right? You know what I mean? People are like a toboggan. I was like, that's a sled, you know? And they're like, you got a toboggan on. I'm like, I did not have a sled on my head. Yeah. So okay, so there's that.
Well, that's just regional dialect differences in the same language.
Right. So that right, right, and that's just in the same language. Right. That's crazy. Okay, so that's the most base. Of what I'm saying is most base. And then the next one is what I call bumper sticker judgments, and a lot of people just know this as don't judge a book by its cover, right? And I think this is, and so the reason I call it bumper sticker judgments is because I was making a bunch of bumper sticker judgments because I would see a bumper sticker on a car, and then I would make a decision of what I thought of that person, and it's just like I have no idea about that person.
I guess sort of like stereotypes.
Well, right, and that's what it leads to, right? So it's a quick judgment. It's based on incomplete information.
Yeah.
You don't know anything about that.
That's a thing. Yeah, where you sort of you use a tiny bit of information to extrapolate to have this greater meaning about some bigger thing.
Right.
Is a logical fallacy.
Well, right, yeah. And that's all, so...
It could be right, but it's a crapshoot.
Well, it's going to be, so we would all have tendencies, right?
Yeah,
tendencies
right.
towards something.
You're not going to have a bumper sticker that says save the whales if you don't have a little bit of a environmental ethic.
Right. So, and then, okay, so, but an easy place where, like, people could probably see it is just the two, where one car has a message, it says whatever, a biblical passage, something about God, something about Jesus, and then the other one has the Jesus fish with Darwin written in it, right?
With the feet. It's got the feet. It's a fish with the feet.
Yeah, it's kind of like it's a dig.
So the first one is the cop car.
Well, they don't say "In God We Trust." Sure, sure. Right. Okay. So then the next level then is this, as it gets more complex. This is what I call that the truth is independent, and what I mean is it's independent from its cultural, its political, or its religious setting. Right. So I think the simplest version is just if you've identified yourself as a particular political party, we'll just use Democrat and Republican here for this country. If you identify yourself as one of those, and your senator that you identify with your group, so we'll just say Democrat. You're a Democrat. You identify as a Democrat. The Democratic senator of your state says blah blah blah, and you're like, that's not true. That's not the way I want it to be.
Right.
You know. Are you going to agree with that simply because he's a Democrat?
Right.
Because that's your identity, the way you identify yourself? Or is the truth like you're like, no man, this guy, he's not understanding that, or she's not understanding that? And of course, vice versa, the same thing's true. So if I identify myself as a Republican and the Democrat senator, in this case, says something that is true.
Oh yeah, right.
I can't, I need to say, go like, yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you. And you think about that. That's like so much of our politics is just split on just deciding. You see the name up there, and it's just like
no, totally. And you cherry pick the things you either disagree with or don't, depending on which story, and you just ignore them.
right,
which is so
right,
not right.
So you have to understand that the truth is independent of what that setting is.
Well, when you said that, and I just have to add this, is that truth then is immediately bent by our simple perception of it. Right. As soon as we enter into the field of reality and say, and then try to interpret a truth, it's wrong, right? It's a version. And so kind of add that to last week's episode where that's part of the problem. And so these are just sort of extreme cases of the different things that we do when we take in the truth and choose how to feel and how to interpret and whether it lines up with this or that, and then how to verbalize it back out. All those are just changing it.
Right.
Changing forms. And so releasing the message is that much more difficult because you got to know all of that. You have to A, understand that all that's happening, and then B, sort of dig through it and weed through it and go, okay, hold on. When you said this, were you just reacting because you don't really, you know what I mean? Like that case with the politician, like, do you really think abortion should be illegal, or is that just because all your people on your side?
Because that's the party line, right?
Anyway.
Or you're towing the party line. Well, okay, so the worst examples of that would be like voting for. So something like pro-life and pro-choice. Not to discuss that thoroughly.
Yeah, just as an example.
On those examples, if you are in the pro-life camp and you are going to vote for this particular politician because they are in the pro-life camp. But really, you are not for reasons, B, C, D,
all the other
E,
things
F,
they represent.
Everything else they represent. It's like you got to really challenge yourself on that one. And I mean, I know that's that's a tough one because they would just say that, well, that's the most important thing to me. Mm-hmm. But it's just like you're really just missing the boat there because it's so involved. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like all these other things matter as well.
And it really seems crazy that two parties could cover all the issues and have anybody. I mean, you're going to disagree with everybody some of the time. Right.
Yeah.
If you're being honest.
So the last version of Release the Message is just knowing, and this is the most complex, it's just that the truth, and we've kind of already talked about this, the truth is oftentimes more than literal. Right? So that's where the story, it's like, I don't know if this happened, but I know that it's true. I don't know if the details happened, but I know it's true. So the truth is more than literal. There's that underlying kernel of information that's important, the lesson learned, the moral of the story. That would be an easy way to think of it. What's the moral of the story?
I'm trying to come up with an example of literal. Like, I wonder if literal is even... I mean, literal sounds like you're basically saying that you would define literal as a 100% accurate verbal interpretation of the truth expressed in a way that makes sense to whoever's part of that. And I don't know that exists. Like, and I just think of it because my wife always talks about she's a very literal person, and that she doesn't even understand sarcasm. And so sarcasm, is saying something wrong to be funny when you know that it's not literal. And she's like, I don't get that because what I hear them say, I interpret as literal. But then I've actually watched her, and I'm like, you're not being literal right now. Right. You know how to. And so I wonder if that even really exists. A literal, is there? So everything, and the only reason I say that is because everything then becomes a story, and it becomes that much more important to understand that. And I just wonder if, what literal even is. Like, are you saying that there's a world that we can live in where everybody communicates to each other literally, without metaphors and without stories?
Yeah. I think that the no, I'm not sure you can, right? I mean, it's like we use these stories to convey information that's deeper than literal.
And okay, and,
Right,
that's okay. Probably maybe because we can't.
Right.
Do it.
Yeah. Absolutely. Right. Yeah.
And as much as we can't understand it, really, we have to sort of say, this is a really complex thing, and here's a way I've come up with to sort of interpret it so that we can all talk about it, but understand that it's wrong. It's like all models are wrong. It's somewhere useful.
Yeah. So okay. So we use things like idioms to convey convey a message.
So an idiom is a model to describe the truth in human language.
Yeah, or convey just a message.
Yeah.
It may be
Right.
Something like break a leg. If I say break a leg, that means good luck.
But so what is
in a
the
setting?
Good, so what
in
is,
a setting.
So is that like intent? Like what is the good luck in that statement? Like the message you're trying to, the message. It doesn't have to be true, right? The message could be like, I'm gonna steal $50 from you, or can it?
Well,
and what I'm gonna do is like,
yeah, I mean, I think
cover that message in a bunch of sleight of hand and trickery, and then like pick your pocket and then walk away.
Well, gosh, dude. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess it's when a story is, already there. I guess like it's like you're using the story or you write the story to convey the information.
It's like an explanation.
An explanation of thing. I'm not sure exactly.
Yeah, that's kind of pointless.
Thing.
It's just, I guess the point is that the message isn't necessarily some deep truth. It could be some
right.
other
Absolutely, it can be very base. It can be very base. So okay, like even earlier, I just said miss the boat.
Right.
Okay. What I mean? It's like you're missing the point. Right, you didn't miss the boat. I'm not telling you to break your leg.
You're not homeless.
Right, yeah. I mean there's tons of little sayings that we do in everyday language that we use things to convey stuff, which of course then for a lot of people like the English language is probably maybe really bad with that. But I'm sure other languages are too, because my family, some of my dad's siblings were born in Italy, and they would sometimes use Italian, and they would say something, and then of course as a kid, what did I say? What did you say? Right? And then they would say whatever in English, and a lot of times it was like, wait, what?
Yeah.
And then they would say like, well, it's kind of lost in translation.
Right.
You kind of lose.
It's a cultural thing. It's almost like sometimes language, is not about the words at all. It's more about feeling and a metaphor, not metaphors, but mood and the way it's said. It's not so much just the words, which again makes communicating to me, it amazes me that it ever results in two people like really understanding each other, because there's so much room for interpretation and semantics and literal and versus metaphorical. And it's like, man, what a muddy...
Well, that's the one thing. So, I mean, I think like social media and comment sections are, maybe not comment sections. I think social media can be a very like positive tool. Is it always? Clearly no. Mm-hmm. But one of the things I just wonder is how much is lost in these, you're trying to, like, I don't like texting with people beyond like, hey, I'm coming over at 11 o'clock. Or,
right. Literal,
can you do this?
Literal.
Yes. Where as soon as you get into a conversation, it's sort of like, okay, first of all, like I have questions about 10 sentences ago. Yeah. So I want to pick this apart in one sentence at a time. Whereas if you and I are having this conversation, like we're having right now, and if you're having a point and I'm like, whoa, hold on, wait, so say that part again. Like, and you're like, okay, well, A plus B equals C. I'm like, oh, okay, I get it now. A plus B equals C. I was thinking that A plus B equals D, and I misunderstood what you said, for whatever reason. And of course, that's super basic, A plus B equals C kind of thing. But, and things are more complex. And then, again, we've talked about this a long time ago, and I think this is so important, is how the words go. So there's the signifier, the actual word. Mm-hmm. There's the signified, that's what's in our head. Mm-hmm. And then there's the referent that signifier represents, right? Mm-hmm. So if we call this a cup, right? Mm-hmm. You can think of that. You actually, I think, brought up in that episode that is it like the jock strap, like the cup to protect?
No, hold on a minute. Are you sure that's a cup? It doesn't look like it would fit.
It's like, what are you talking about? And so, of course, but if maybe it's like I'm talking about a cup, and then in your mind you picture this kind of cup or whatever. And again, that's super basic, but it gets very complex immediately. And I mean, one of my
totally.
favorite things
Again.
is just laziness and entitlement, which people just throw around willy-nilly. Oh, that person's lazy and that person's entitled, or this person's disrespecting somebody and this person, you know what I mean? It's just like, wait a minute. Those are all complicated. The person might be demonstrating a behavior that could be identified as lazy, okay? But it doesn't necessarily mean that they are collectively lazy, okay? And
Yeah, sure. Right.
Right. So, right. I mean, there could be, you could be completely wrong that they're not. Oh, that guy doesn't mow their lawn.
Yeah,
he doesn't mow his lawn.
You've used that lazy example a lot, and I like it. And it makes me think of, when you just said it, of shame and guilt. You know, the difference between shame and guilt is you feel bad about something you did. Shame is you feel like you're a bad person. And so what I see in a lot of this social media crap is, you know, people skipping way ahead to, oh, you exhibited this one behavior that could be interpreted as lazy. Therefore, you are a big, giant slob of a turd.
Right.
Like, that's so illogical.
Right. And,
for anybody to even listen to that.
And so that's why, all these release the message, reverse the roles, and remove the labels to me. This is what ends up having to be like the background program running in your mind.
Exactly.
Because I am not going to...
It's the model.
So I'm not saying that I've never used a adjective to describe somebody or even a label to identify somebody, because there's times where it could be really important to have the label as an identifier, like, hey, I would like to play some basketball. Is there any basketball players, around? Okay, so I'm trying to identify myself that. But in terms of using any term in a negative way, and again, I'm not saying that I never do this, because it's hard, right? And especially the way
nobody never does anything.
We're raised, right? You know what I mean? And it's so common to do it. But I really worked on saying, I think we used the quick brown fox or the quick red fox jumped over the lazy dog, right? The fox jumped over the dog.
Yeah, right.
That's what happened. We have no idea if the dog is lazy, right? You know what I mean? And the
We're
color,
making that up.
the color doesn't necessarily even matter to the situation. And more so than like that person's lazy, that person's entitled, that person's being disrespectful, that person is fat, that person's undereducated, overeducated, whatever, any kind, snowflake, any kind of derogatory term.
Value judgment.
Yeah, it's a value judgment. It's a derogatory term, so remove that label, okay? Now, there's the person, so I think we've talked a little bit about like work, right? Okay, so the person, I work with them and they're so lazy. Okay, well maybe they are. Maybe they are. Maybe they don't understand exactly how to work. They don't know what that means. And if you do, again, we've talked about this a ton.
Yeah.
If you understand something, somehow you need to convey that to them and not just attack them.
Right.
You know? And so really what I'm trying to do is look into the person and see inside their soul or whatever you want to call that.
Yeah.
Whatever is...
To figure out what's needed
Yeah.
to get to the message.
Right. That's what is inside of them, what really matters, right? And if we are all part of one big whole, we are all connected, and if you use the term soul, and I've become comfortable with the term soul, whereas for a while I probably was uncomfortable with it because of the religious connotation.
Yeah.
But there's something that it connects all of us. And so the soul aspect of us, the unique aspect that connects all of us together, we're all in that together. And it's like if we're hurting, if we're broken, if we just don't understand something yet, is as simple as that. It's I just don't understand it yet.
What's wrong with that?
And you don't know what you don't know, right? So you don't know that you don't know how to work, maybe, you know? So it's our job, instead of attacking people. So I work. I practice it. That's what we talked about.
Yeah, that's a great
it's a practice.
Word,
it's a daily practice where I remove the labels. I take all the labels off what I'm talking about. And I say, what happened, right? You know what I mean? The fox jumped over the dog. That's what happened. Okay, that's what I saw. Now, my perspective was, then I can admit it's okay to have thoughts of other things. But where does it matter? Or just even talking about okay, that lawn looks terrible. It's not mowed. It's like, well, I'm actually leaving this area of grass for bees. Right. You know what I mean?
It's not that the landowner is lazy.
Right. Yeah. It's not that they're
or poor or any of this.
Yeah. So, there could be a reason for it. So, and making even those value judgments that I like it or dislike it, take those off too, And so the biggest one then is just where we just instantly label things good and bad.
Yeah. Right.
Okay. That's the ultimate one. That's good. That's bad.
What is the saying? Isn't there a saying, good or bad? Who's to say? I guess it's that the parable of the horse.
Oh, yeah. Well, okay. So that's a good one. I don't know if we've talked the farmer and the mare.
Yeah, the farmer and the mare.
Yeah. So that's a good one. So maybe we'll talk about that and kind of wrap this up today, and just kind of see where we go. And I'm actually thinking maybe we'll just kind of review everything after
that's
this
a good
next.
idea.
So for the farmer and the mare, so a farmer had one mare, and he wakes up and the mare is gone, and he says, or the neighbors come and are like, oh my God, that's so horrible, that you've lost the only mare you had, and he simply says, maybe. And then the next day the mare comes back with 3 stallions. So now he has a mare and 3 stallions, and they're like, oh my gosh, what incredible luck, And he says, well, maybe. And then the tribe, the community goes to war, the next part is that the son is trying to break the stallions, right, into to make them so they can ride them and use them or whatever, and the son falls off and breaks his leg. And he says, they're like, oh my God, well, what bad luck. Again, maybe. And then the tribe or the community goes to war. And then, of course, they're looking for people to go to war and to fight the battle. And then the son doesn't have to go. So all those things, what was good and bad?
Yeah.
Where do you say? And as you chase it back, what happened. And then, of course, there'd be like story before it, right? And so this is, okay. This is one of the things, too, that like my wife and I think a lot about. And there was a movie with Will Smith called Collateral Beauty. And not to get into that, but what Collateral Beauty, it's almost like a Silver Lining. You could think of it that way. They're really close. Yeah, Collateral Beauty and Silver Lining are really similar, if not identical. Okay, and so in 2010, at the time, we had 3 dogs. And our one dog, she would have been 6 that year. And she was terrified of thunderstorms and fireworks. And it was 4th of July, and we purposely made sure we were home early to be home with them. And for whatever reason, we didn't lock the dog door. We didn't shut the dog door. And we had fans running to try to drown out the fireworks or whatever. But anyways, we went to bed. We got up the next day. We had somebody renting a room in our house. And Bella, our dog, was not there. And we're like, well, maybe, she's in our renter's room. And so I think we actually just went and knocked and we're like, hey,
you got a dog in there.
Is Bella in there? And Bella was not in there. And then, so Bella was clearly missing. And so what we figured out was that Bella actually rammed her head into a lighter kind of fence, weaker fence, until it bent up, right? So as she pushed it in, it bent up, and then she slithered underneath it and then was running. The long story short is she got hit by a car that night. And, of course, that was horrible, horrible. But because of that, Shelley and I went shortly after and got 2 dogs, Skylar and Sarah, which are going to turn 12 this year in August. And I can't imagine my life now for the last 12 years without them.
Maybe you wouldn't have got them without the...
Right, without her going, without her getting hit. We already had 3 at the time. We certainly weren't going to get 2 more. Now we have 5. And so that was collateral beauty. It was collateral beauty that, yes, the horrible thing happened.
Right.
The horrible thing happened of Bella getting hit by a car. And, of course, we were sad and we cried. And, at the time we were devastated for lots of reasons. But then we got those. And then, even later with even our other dogs, when our dog Luna passed away, so we were down to 2 dogs, And one of my friends was just like, hey, she called the dog Blondie. It's what we call Maya now. She's like, hey, do you want Blondie? And it's just like, well, because our other dog just passed away, she saw the opportunity to give. She was fostering the dog she called Blondie. It was what we call Maya. She gave us that dog, and again, so kind of collateral beauty. Yeah, like we did lose Luna, and that wasn't as devastating. Luna had lived a good life. She had passed away from cancer. She went very peacefully. We didn't have to make the decision, kind of thing. She didn't get hit by a car, right?
Yeah,
you know what I mean? But it's kind of a degree of a collateral beauty that it was like if that didn't happen when it did.
Yeah.
Maybe she gives that dog to somebody else, and then we don't have that dog. And of course, this is just it's life, right?
Well,
That's
life.
Life.
It's interesting because it's like you don't know what the message is a lot of times, and it complicates things. And that need to know what it is related to sort of this other stuff of this sort of imposing our ideas and opinions on whatever it is because we want to be right.
Right.
It kind of messes it up. So part of it is being open to like just being ignorant and not being afraid of being wrong because you don't know.
Yeah, and maybe even not just being like not thinking it is it because we might like misinterpret ignorant, but it's just being is opened to it. I'm just open to what happens.
Right.
Like I don't know. Like this seems terrible. So probably for you. And if I'm putting words in your mouth, just stop me. But so you've been divorced. That was not good at the time.
At the time, it seems like a bad thing.
In retrospect, collateral beauty. Mm-hmm. You are married, and have a daughter now because of that.
Yeah, well, that's true.
Yeah,
because I think sometimes I wonder if those aren't just stories we tell ourselves because we don't want to live a life of misery. We don't want to say this happened and there is no collateral beauty because this sucked so bad. We don't know. I mean, some people do that. I mean, I would argue I have people in my family who are still focused on things that happened 40 years ago and have never really allowed the collateral beauty in. I don't know.
Sure.
Or just chosen a different, one could argue. But again, it comes down to what kind of life do you want to live? Like, you're going to flavor it with, do you want this to suck? Right. So I think part of this is like us imposing our, there's some active part in it, right? It's a choice of whether or not we want to interpret something as being a good thing or a bad thing.
Right. Well, so you have your state of being. So how do you want to?
Yeah, to right. Be? So
you help control that state of being.
And I certainly know people who are divorced who became sour, bitter people.
Sure.
As a result of it, for pretty much the rest of their lives. So it's like, is that?
Well, yeah. I think that's like you can't always say that it's always going to happen. But again, so you wouldn't know. And then, what if, what if it's 20 years of sour bitterness, and then you find the person?
Yeah. Well, I just think that's probably more related to just some element of choice, and you sort of have to. It made me think of what my coach Neil says. It's like, life unfolds before you. Right. You have to sort of get over this idea that you are creating the path as you go. There's a little bit of both, but in a big part of it is a lot of it's out of your control, and that's how you interpret it. So.
Yeah, right. So you can only control your aspect of it. So the things happen to you, whatever those are, and you can react to it, which we've talked about. Instead of react, you create how you deal with it. So you take the lesson,
that's so cool.
And you go, and that's. I'm not saying that's easy to do.
Well, no, none of it is easy to do. But the first step is awareness. I think we talked about that maybe in one of the first episodes of just sort of like, learning how to see these things happening before you're 10 steps down the road into this automatic model from your culture that's telling you what to do.
Well, and so that's why I think then it's so important as you have these things running as your background operating system, reverse the roles, release the message, remove the labels. Okay, one of the easiest ways is removing those labels of the things like that are big, broad things. This is horrible.
Yeah, divorce.
Hold on.
Bad.
But hold on. You don't know. And you're going through a hard time and you feel sad, and maybe those feelings are going to create a lesson for you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And feel them, certainly. I think that's a thing. Like
that's a big part of it.
That's almost like a should thing that we kind of create. Like, well, don't cry. You should get over it. You should. But it's like, no, listen, man. I'm going to cry. I'm going to feel this. Why does this make me sad? What did I do personally? Now, it's not always that.
No, I think
Yeah.
I think that's a huge part of it is
yeah.
letting it happen instead of fighting it.
Right.
I guess that's the unfolding part.
Yeah.
But it's both.
Right, and it's complicated. So the kind of to wrap up today, the important thing is release the message. It's multifaceted, but it's how do I point myself towards the truth, toward what is most important, towards wholeness, integrity, God, the universe, whatever you want, life, right? I want to orient myself towards that, and I'm going to make mistakes along the way, but certainly by being aware, which it always comes back to that. Like you say that all the time, right? You got to start with being aware.
Well, because not everybody is. Not because there's anything wrong with them. It's just
right.
We forgot to practice that. Yeah, it's fascinating because it's hard to do. It's like I keep finding myself wanting to know, well, how? How do you do all these things? And it really comes down to this change in behavior. We're used to behaving according to this old model. We want to introduce a new model. Well, we got to practice this one in order to, stop. It's like a golfer. Like they continually slice it. Well, you got to change your swing.
Right.
If you keep hitting the ball the same way, it's probably going to keep doing the same thing.
Yeah, and bro, dude, I think again that using the term practice is such a good idea. I'm not sitting here saying that I mastered this. I'm some sort of enlightened being that has done this perfectly all the time. Like, I fall on my face sometimes.
But you have more practice than the average person. So
well,
that's what you do.
Thank you.
Well, that's what you do. Like I tell people, it's like, how do I get better at mandolin or guitar? It's like, well, play with people who are better than you.
Right.
That's how you do it.
Yeah. So, dude, from
you chase them.
Right. Yeah. From the gym perspective. From my life, right? It's like when you work out with people that are more fit. It's probably going to help motivate you. You're going to see what they do, how they do it. What they eat, what they do. It's going to help you with that. Whether you're running, riding a bike, or practicing mandolin, or
self mastery, like we're talking about. Like
right.
you said exactly the same thing earlier, where you sort of, you take the examples from people who have done this more. I forget what you said before, but same thing.
Right. Yeah. Right.
How you learn more quickly. It's not in isolation.
Right. Well,
you don't reinvent the wheel.
And that's one of the things I think, dude. It's where that is what religion is supposed to be. That connection, right? And
the sort of hierarchy of like, look how I did it. You can do it like this too, instead of floundering around out there on your own trying to figure it out.
Yeah. And so, with release the message is like you're releasing the message there. Are we playing into stereotypes and prejudice of other groups within our group, right?
Wow,
I'm going to create that. Like, you got to be honest with yourself and go, you know what, man, my church, my religion, whatever, and it's not going to be like the religion as a whole, but like my particular church, are we playing into that with hatred and vitriol towards another group and making the other the bad guy?
Totally.
And so we got to really be careful to that. So that would be just one more version of release the message, and it's challenging yourself. You have to challenge yourself for the truth. Like, what is really happening here? And do I want to be a part of that?
Exactly. And I hope that I can sort of learn. That makes me sort of excited to want to do that in every possible opportunity of exchange I have with other humans. Like, okay, I'm going to practice this. Here's another chance. I'm checking out at Walmart or whatever. I can practice this. I can get better at this. And maybe this is what I was trying to the last point I was trying to make is helping other people along. It's not just about you doing it and getting better. It's about, you providing opportunities for other people to do the same thing and
right.
help where you can without sort of saying, okay, you're wrong. Let me tell you.
Well, part of it is is absolutely just by you demonstrating, and bringing that energy that it comes with.
Totally,
you're going to help that situation
in a way that's not like imposing or judgmental or uninvited.
Right, and that's the thing, right? And I think those are key words, dude. Right, you're not imposing your will on somebody. You're not being judgmental towards them, right? And that's where remove the labels comes in. judgments are almost all labels.
Yeah, right, right.
Take those off.
And what's the worst case? You're wrong.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry, I'm trying to demonstrate integrity. I guess you didn't need it. My bad.
Right. Yeah, well,
you're going to move past that.
Right. Chances are it's not going to be. It's not going to be taken. And I mean, that's what, dude, it's so important, I think, for people to understand that everybody's actions, at the end, I mean, if they're at peace with themselves, if they're calm with themselves, most likely they're going to stay calm. And it's not really about no matter what they say, So it's when you're when you're in a state of disarray, right? You're not calm, That's a way to even think about that, right? In terms of okay, so calmness, peacefulness lends itself towards integrity, right? That's part of the things you feel, right? When you're living within integrity, within wholeness, you're calm, you're peaceful.
You're not defensive.
Our little feeling wheel here, this is cool. So calm, grounded, relaxed, trusting, accepted, nourished. Okay. So all of those are things that you feel content, safe, loved. All right. When you feel that way, your actions, your behavior is going to demonstrate that. And if somebody else acts opposite of that, when you're in that state, it's not going to throw you into anger or whatever, because you're in that peaceful state, And of course, that's not to say that if somebody attacks you physically that you can't. But still, there's a
huge point in here, that that's in addition to awareness, sort of maintaining that attitude, whatever that is. There's a certain attitude we want to maintain that makes this a lot easier,
right?
From both perspectives, it's more inviting to other people, and it's better for you because you're more able to stay in that.
Yeah, so that's what I would say. That would be maintaining your equanimity of being.
Yeah, right.
This is my being. My being is peaceful.
Maybe that's the next.
My being is grounded. My being is calm. That's what I want to maintain. That's what I would say is to not have desires, except for that's your only true desire is to be in that state, in that calm, peaceful state. And that's true freedom. That is true freedom.
And that requires practice and all that. That really brings this whole episode to another level for me. That's the piece I kept chasing of sort of not the point, but the spirit of the message. The purpose is really what you just said and the calm that I seek or whatever that I talk about is what you just said.
Right, yeah, and that's what we all seek, whether we know it or not, and that's why every action is either an act of love or a call for love, because that is what we seek. Wow. We want to be calm. We want to be peaceful.
We need to take whatever you just said and do that next time, because that that's a huge chunk of it for me, I think.
Okay, and talk about that.
But you used a term just a second ago to describe it, so we'll find
the equanimity of being.
Yeah, maybe something, whatever we sort of whatever you.
Yeah. Okay. Well, cool.
Yeah.
Release the message. So kind of just wrap that up. The inability to release the message, it leads to things like prejudice, bias, hypocrisy. Have it as a background, running in your background. This is what one of the things you're practicing is release the message. I'm always pointing myself, I'm always orienting myself towards the truth to find out what is most important or what is true in the situation, and not what I want to be true.
Yeah,
it goes to that question of do you want to be, would you rather know the truth or do you want to be right? I want to know the truth, right? Yeah. And, and then that's how you live in integrity. The closer you get to that. Still being human, you can't know all things.
Perfect.
There you have it. All right. Episode 10. Thank you.